again to defining success to drive strategy, the role of ABM in virtual events. I am pleased to introduce our panelists. Let's start with an introduction, because I know you did this already with half the group, but we're going to do it again just briefly for everyone. Let's start with Dawn.
Hi everyone, Dawn Colossi, soon to be the Chief Marketing Officer at Software AG. That's on Monday. When I signed up, I was the Chief Marketing Officer at FocusVision. So I'm excited to be here and talk about how we really saw ABM working in our events and what that meant to our pipeline.
Thank you, Dawn, and congratulations on Software AG. That's wonderful news. Melissa.
Hi, everyone. Melissa Mertl. I am working in a role that I called myself the Global Marketing Partner. I work directly with a set of key global accounts on all our marketing efforts. So trying to be as strategic as possible with the accounts. I've been with Palo Alto Networks for about, I guess I just passed 4 years. And I realize I've been in the tech industry for decades now, plural, but excited to be on the panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. Auseh.
Hi, Auseh Britt, VP of Growth Marketing at Terminus. Some of you may be familiar with Terminus. We are an account-based marketing platform that helps you execute on your ABM programs. I've been with the company for about 8 months now. Prior to that, I led marketing for a BI software company where I was also leading account-based marketing as well. So I have some firsthand experience as a practitioner and also now working with a company that also enables people to do ABM.
Wonderful. Thanks, Auseh. Looking forward to your contributions later on in the panel for sure, especially from Terminus's perspective, working with so many different clients. Caitlin.
I'm Caitlin Tucker. I lead the experience marketing team at Quantum Metric, very high growth startup. I was one of the first 40 employees and we just got our unicorn Series B at the beginning of this year. So it's been a wild ride for sure over the last 2.5 years. But we really built the experience team off the belief that in SaaS, marketing and sales, your products can be the best on the market, but you're really selling multi-year long-term relationships. And so my team takes on all of those projects that really kind of are able to build those relationships with customers and prospects, and field marketing and events is a huge part of that. So we work really closely in partnership with our ABM managers, but they actually sit on the revenue team. So I have a little bit of a different perspective from some of the other ladies on the panel, and I look forward to it.
Wonderful, Caitlin. So that's our expert panel. Before I get started with our first question, I just want to let everyone know that we are a small group. So if you have a comment or you want to interrupt, that's fine. You could either put something in the chat or you could raise your hand. We'll be happy to call on you, and we encourage interaction and feedback and your questions. We want to hear from you for sure. So with that, let's go to our first question. And this one is simply, let's define ABM. What does ABM at your organization mean? And let's start with Dawn.
When we started ABM 2 companies ago, it more meant target account marketing, right? So we took a look at accounts that were on the sales team's radar and their hit list. And we combined that with intent data and internal data to understand what kind of action and brand awareness we had within those accounts, and were those accounts giving signals that they were in market. And using that sort of methodology, we were able to tier them to sort of a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and then used other firmographics and other data into that to understand, okay, how are we going to go after these accounts? And it really became a strategy, an engagement strategy on how to engage the entire account, right? Because normally when you have somebody who is interested in your product or your company, it's usually one contact that you're seeing in your marketing activities, and that's usually not the person who's solely responsible for buying or for budget. So our account-based marketing strategy was really, how do we surround the accounts where we see an opportunity, we see action, so to get them to a certain point of conversion for the sales team, and then how do we continue that engagement to to pipeline into sale. So it's I believe a more sort of recent definition of ABM. I know there's others on the panel that are executing on a more traditional way of going with an ABM strategy.
So really, it's a matter of focusing on customers or focusing on prospects or target accounts.
It was really both customers and prospects, and where we saw opportunity. It was getting away from that spray and pray mentality, right? We've all been in this situation where we say, oh, we're going to go after the global 5,000, or we're going after everyone in technology. And those tactics usually are very you can't really prove much ROI on that, right? You see what sticks to the wall. So instead, we flipped that and said, okay, let's take a look at those customers where we believe we still have opportunity. Let's take a look at those prospects that are showing intent signals externally around what we're selling. And how do we bring them into our marketing fold? How do we get them engaged? How do we get them to a place where they're going to convert? And it wasn't just the contact, right? All of our marketing technology and Salesforce is all set up for you to follow a contact. And we worked in a way where we were able to look at the entire account, understand who is probably the decision makers within that account, and how do we deliver specific messages to those people, right? You have a different message going to the CMO than you do to the digital marketing manager. You have a different message going to the IT manager than you do to the CIO. So how do you tailor those messages to the entire account to make sure that they're all on the same page that they want to move forward with your company?
Thank you, Dawn. Melissa, and also, your role is different than everyone else's because you're so embedded in the sales team, Melissa. So if you could explain a little bit more about that in your definition, that would be helpful as well.
Yeah, and I'll talk to you about my definition versus maybe my company's definition, because the company as a whole, definitely throws around the term account-based marketing. And as Dawn says, it's more like targeted marketing. In my world where I am, I'm assigned with 2 smaller districts. There are approximately 70 accounts, and I work directly with the account teams. So account-based marketing actually means planning and being part of the account plan with my sales team. So everything looks a little bit different for every account. Some are white space, some would be white space with one product, and we do work with personas. So, it's almost like an entirely different account when you break it down to how we're actually going to go to market and try and, work with this customer. So it's a real experimental sort of ground right now. And I use everything at my, that's available. I'm constantly being the person when I hear about a new tool that's like, I'm the perfect world to do a beta trial on. Let's work with Terminus. Like, let me be that person that, can provide this value, because I can do it for all of my account teams versus some of the other people in a field marketing role that have far too many accounts, and how do they actually choose, right? And in my case too, I do, even with the 70 accounts that I work with, and approximately, a dozen or so account managers, that everyone is a little bit different. Some of them, we have very, sophisticated, customer journeys mapped out. Others we look at and we're at a point where, we don't have all the account intelligence yet to even set up that journey. So we're in a different stage. So it means so many different things. Where I want to be actively doing something with all of my accounts. So that might even be doing some industry specific content. So that's not account based, but here are a bunch of my white space accounts that I hope from doing some different activities in, I can actually really take a look at, well, how did they respond to some of this? Like, I'm just able to get really microscopic about what's going on, and then what happens next, and we can make a decision on that. So I live in this little petri dish that's kind of fun.
Thank you for all that. There's so many stuff in there I want to follow up on, especially interested in the content piece, on how you customize content for these different accounts. But I guess we can come back to that. Auseh, your definition from Terminus of ABM. Everyone get out your pens and paper.
Yeah. Well, well, to me, ABM is really a go-to-market strategy more than anything else. Obviously, Terminus has a software platform to kind of help with ABM, but at its core, it's really a go-to-market strategy where sales and marketing work together in tight alignment, really to identify and engage highly targeted accounts to drive revenue. So like you mentioned, it can take many different forms. It can be focused on new logo acquisition or pipeline acceleration or customer expansion. So those are the ways that we kind of bucket our ABM programs, because it can be an effective strategy for all of those things. And I think it can take different forms too. So we have, we could, like Melissa, we do the strategic accounts. We do more like bespoke type of campaigns that are on a one-to-one basis for our, what we have deemed internally as those strategic accounts, knowing that they're going to have larger buying committees. They tend to be, multinational in nature. And they're a mix. Some are current customers where we may be just in one business unit, but we want to get into multiple business units, or it may be new logo acquisition focused. So we have those types of campaigns. And then we also do, ABM could be one to few type of accounts where you have more of a larger segment. And then we do also utilize ABM for a more one-to-many, where you can kind of leverage more programmatic. Again, it's not going to be a spray and pray type of typical demand model, but it is a larger group of accounts. So we tend to do that for more new logo acquisition and tiering those accounts, kind of like Dawn said, we tier them as A's and B's. And we do quarterly or half-year campaigns that are focused on those accounts. So I think ABM can take different forms. I think what it's not is the typical lead funnel contact base. It's a shift from contacts to accounts, which is similar to what Dawn said. And it's the traditional flip my funnel. So instead of it being like this, it's like this, and just getting a little bit more targeted. But I do think it starts with that tight alignment. You have to have that marketing and sales alignment in selecting what the goals, objectives are, and what the accounts are that you're going after.
Just to put you on the spot a little bit about quantity of accounts when it comes to, I guess there is no average ABM program because it differs depending upon so many factors that you mentioned. But is there sort of an upper ceiling of like if you've got 1,000 accounts, is that just too many to be ABM? And if you've got, 10, that actually works, right? Because you're really focused on these 10 accounts. So are there any ceilings or floors when it comes to quantity of accounts, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, I think in terms of the floors, you want to be customized, but when you select if you're only going after 10 accounts, you want to make sure that they're really the right accounts to go after, and they're showing those intent signals that they're in the buying cycle. I think that's one of if we're talking about mistakes that in the past, I could also talk about that in my first one at ABM at my previous company, where we did a great job of identifying our ICP and our personas and like all that, and getting the content, it's the right content for this persona. But those intent signals were hard to find, or we weren't leveraging them like we should be. So they're the right people, but if they're not in the buying cycle and they're not looking for a solution, they don't have that pain that you can solve, then it falls on deaf ears. So I think that's really critical. So if all that kind of comes, together, and you have the bandwidth to do more of those customized, personalized, that's the holy grail, is the more stuff that Melissa's doing, but not all companies have the resources internally, I think, to get down to that level. So it's a bit of a balance. So I don't know if there's really a minimum per se, but as a ceiling, I've also seen situations where if you give SDR, BDR, ADR too many accounts, or an AE, and say, go do ABM, they start just giving these general messages because they need to touch these accounts. That's what they're kind of being measured on. So then it doesn't, to me, it's not effective. So I think it's, if you're looking for a number, I mean, more on the programmatic side, like trying to manage like 30, 40 accounts at a time. If you're trying to get 3 to 5 people to each of those accounts, I mean, it quickly starts, amplifying the number of people that you need to outreach to. But ABM to me is not, we need to work 5,000 accounts at once. That to me is going back to marketing to targeted accounts. It's not doing account-based marketing.
Got it. Thank you.
Mhm.
Caitlin, you get the pleasure of following up.
Yeah, so
My dog who's barking very loud. I apologize for that.
That's great. That means mine will probably start once he hears it. I think ABM means really whatever your organization needs it to mean, if I'm being really honest. And I think that what stops a lot of people from starting ABM is waiting until they fully understand what ABM needs to mean and exactly how it needs to be defined. So I would just encourage everyone on the call, if you're waiting until you really feel comfortable with ABM to start that type of programming, please don't. Just dive in and kind of make it mean whatever you need it to mean. So at Quantum, we are really high growth young startup. So 95% of our marketing efforts is focused on new logo acquisition rather than retention. We just haven't reached that stage of maturity as an organization. So we think of our ABM programming to really give us 2 things, and that's focus and impact. So to be able to narrow in, we take a quarterly approach. Marketing defines those key verticals where the most opportunity exists, where if we spend all of our time and really align both marketing and sales organizations around that focus for a defined period of time, then we know we can make a larger impact so that we're not, like John was saying, spraying and praying, or kind of having those drop in the bucket random acts of marketing. So by throwing the full weight of both organizations in marketing and sales around a specific vertical, and then choosing within that vertical those target accounts where that opportunity does exist, and then taking that really personalized approach per account under that umbrella of really having our content and our experience and our digital teams and everybody really focused on serving that specific community of customers and prospects. That's really helped us to just be a lot less chaotic and a lot more focused and impactful with our marketing.
Great, thank you. So for the next question, we're going to go in reverse order. So I'm going to stick with you, Caitlin. So now that we've defined ABM, how are we using ABM with virtual events? And then related question, do you think virtual has made ABM harder or easier, or hasn't really made a difference either way?
So the way that we use events in our ABM kind of programming and thinking is in kind of a twofold way. I would anticipate that most people here on the call are thinking about virtual events as hosted events that the company puts on. We're in charge of deciding who that target market is and who comes, who we invite, what the programming is, what the messaging is. I think I'd be remiss not to mention that conferences and virtual sponsorships of events also play a big part in the way that Quantum thinks about event programming within ABM, because we have found that that investment in some of those big industry shows or shows that kind of give back to a certain community within those target accounts that you're really focused on, that can go a long way. So it's something that I think a lot of organizations have stepped out of and been really afraid of, to spend all that money on sponsorships at virtual events when we've all seen virtual booths fall completely apart. Sometimes that investment in showing that you're going to show up in that way for those accounts does help to get those new intros, and certainly helps to build that lead funnel as well, with the contacts that you're able to get from events like that, leveraging other brands, BDI being one of them. And they're great networks that they can pull into your new campaigns and programming moving forward. But definitely hosted events, more strategy there. So the way that we really think about it is, once we know we're moving into, like I said, that key vertical focus, we put together events and really make sure that all that content and experience is very tailored to that audience and what we know that they want to hear, what we've heard from our customers that look really similar to those types of organizations that we're trying to go after. And we tie experience into all of those events. So I've found that if you can get people, the easiest way to take people's guards down is one, with alcohol, and two, with a shared learning experience. So we do a lot of like class type of things, or bringing in mixologists or celebrity chefs into our virtual events to pair that education about our products and about what everybody, you know, cares about in their day-to-day jobs with. There's something about when you're trying something new for the first time with a bunch of strangers, that guard just immediately comes down. And then we're able to get people actually talking to each other, which is the sweet spot. We want to, in our event programming, hear from Quantum as little as possible and really make sure that the audience voice is what's heard, because that's where you get all of those nuggets to be able to then go and tailor the rest of your campaign and, you know, sales campaigns, marketing campaigns, programmings based off of what we're learning out of those virtual events.
Thank you, Caitlin. Aussie, same question.
Yeah.
Into virtual, and you think it's, and I would actually say, not only for your company, but how are you helping your customers do this? And then, in your opinion, virtual easier or harder when it comes to ABM versus face-to-face events, in-person events?
Yeah, we've used virtual events in different types of formats in our ABM programs. Right now, we're doing our ABM campaign for new logo acquisition is under this, what we're calling our Tour de Terminus theme. We've done a number of acquisitions in the last 12 to 15 months. And what we're finding is the awareness of some of the capabilities our platform now offers is still kind of low. Like, people still think of us traditionally as our ad experiences product. But we've added chat and web experiences and some other capabilities. So the whole point of this campaign was to give them a tour of the new platform. And so within that, we've slotted in webinars on each of those. So I think a webinar is a virtual event, but we're using that really to engage those A and B accounts on these specific topics. Then we've also done kind of what Caitlin's point, like more of an experiential type of event. We did a campaign in Q4 to some old like closed lost opportunities. And it was all under this this coffee type of theme called Terminus and Tinker. We paired up with a local coffee roaster in Indianapolis, which is where we have one of our offices. One, to kind of during this COVID time, kind of support a local business, but also just to kind of help people as they fueling their 2021 plans. And that event was, they got a direct mail kit that had the coffee, and it had this AeroPress that they would use during the actual event. And the event was more fun. Like, we just wanted to engage people. We didn't talk too much about our product or anything like that, but it was looking at different kind of brewing techniques. So we're also using these smaller like type of experiential events to just engage these accounts that we want to talk to. And then we've also done more smaller roundtable, invite only, like this, like having smaller groups of people on a very specific topic, and just getting them to share, talk to their peers, learn from each other. So that's how we've used it. I'd say what I have learned in this past year with virtual events is more people are apt to sign up, because in most cases they're free, or there's a very low cost to attend. So registration numbers to me seem through the roof, more so than we would get in an in-person event where they'd have to deal with travel and all that, or time away. But engagement is much harder. Some folks you will engage, some won't. Sometimes it's hard to get that conversation going, where you can do that in an in-person event, I think, more easily.
Great points. Thank you. Melissa.
So my world's a little bit different. Again, when I'm doing events, and your question was, is it harder or easier?
That's the second part of the question, yes.
Yeah, so I'm going to start with that, because I'm going to say it's just different, right? Like, the expectations are different. I think our ability to be, nimble and creative are far higher. So I like being forced to do something, because I think that enforces creativity. And I work with my sales teams. We wanted to get really integrated with a certain department within some of our key accounts. And I knew that one of my reps was really into like learning about beer and like truly passionate. Like we started talking about how he had been to this online, beer thing and how amazing it was. And I was like, Tommy, well, let's see, like, does Terry over at ABC company, like, is he into beer? Well, Terry happens to be in beer, right? So it got really good because it was authentic, because Tommy is truly passionate about beer. And so was our customer. And we couldn't ship beer to people overseas because this was an overseas group, but I was able to send fun things to the people overseas anyway that were beer related and branded. So that got excitement coming up to the event. We've now done 4 of them with this team, and we have like a huge PO. So we hit the sweet spot on both sides, because the intent of the event is always education. But this team just sort of started growing because we were known that it was, a really good, beer, they called a Cicerone, who talks about the beer, who was on that, and he would find like really hard to get beer. And would send it out, and then we would have the discussion about it. And I heard about like after parties or after Zooms, I guess you might call them, that happened after the event. So they were really fun. But I think the thing was, we had a champion, right, at this account who was interested in the content and had a team that we wanted to get to. So there's always that piece of it. So we were being authentic. It was content that the customer really wanted to know about. We got the right people there. The timing was right because there was a point in time where they were interested in it. Like, and we just it was like, I don't want to say it was a perfect storm. I don't know what the opposite of that is, the positive end of a perfect storm. Maybe a rainbow, I don't know. But it just worked out really great. So we've tried to emulate this. And it doesn't always work with other accounts because you don't have all those things lined up. So it's sort of a matter of experimentation. But we did a very cool like chocolate tasting to try and get to know again a new group. And like Auseh said, there was no education to it. It was just, we want you to be introduced to X, Y, and Z teams. So the purpose of some of our events are very different. But again, I find in my sort of little circle that it is better just to go out to a single account and not try and mix them, right? Because we know that there is need and interest. We have to get the timing right, I also find with online events that our subject matter experts are far more available. No travel, their schedule. So I can ask for the best people in the company to, get on, and that's really, really valuable. So our company has, said, get on people's calendars, do them. Giving people advanced notice, getting some excitement coming up to it, and personal touches, because I'm always like, I'm the person that my customer knows now. Tommy is not necessarily reminding them about events and things like that. I'm seen as part of the team, and sometimes that customer will ask me for stuff sometimes too. They can't get a hold of someone. So there is that, that accessibility, that excitement. I can't tell you, and it makes my job really fun because it is so authentic. Did I get everything?
Good stuff.
Yeah, and again, it's just a matter of experimentation, right? And sometimes we, can't be afraid to fail and try different things and for different groups, because different things for different personas are just always going to be different. So I think the thing is to wear many hats and to, try and hit that sweet spot.
I think one thing you mentioned that I think is key too is having that internal advocate at the customer account, because they will help get people to your event. Like,
I almost won't do anything unless somebody at that account wants it. Like we don't even try and push it, right? So, and we make a big effort to make it really special and memorable too. Like we want to make it an experience and to have, I always try and have an exceptional experience no matter what it is. It's a straight webinar or, some fancy beer tasting. It doesn't matter. It should be exceptional.
I like that chocolate tasting.
Oh my gosh, they're so good. I'll tell you about them. I'll put that in the chat. They're so good.
Dawn?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you sort of my lay of the land. I worked for a private equity We were a very small team, about 12. Anybody who's worked for private equity knows that budget is very, very, very tight. So I learned very quickly how to do more with less. So no gasping on the line, but I eliminated all in-person events before COVID.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't afford it. The resources flying didn't make any sense. And I became very unpopular for a short amount of time until people saw that virtual was working. So when, COVID happened and the world shut down, we just kept going, and it really became more of where we were pointing our arrows. Budget got pulled in like most people, which meant we couldn't do a lot of, acquiring new audiences. But instead, what we did was we went back to our database and said, okay, let's look at the audiences we've acquired in the last 18 months. How do we get them to conversion? How do we get them to engagement and then to conversion? So that's, it was really who we were targeting rather than our activities. So as far as a virtual event goes, we were running monthly, about every 3 weeks, monthly webinars based on a subject area, a thought leadership type of webinar, right? Based on a subject that we were already talking about in our content, in our marketing, that we were engaging audiences with. And it was all part of our brand story, right? So starting with whatever and FocusVision is a research technology company. And most research is happening because people want to make their experience better with their company, right? So starting with that pain point, what were the areas that we needed to talk about under that? And we had 5 or 6 areas where we were experts and we were talking about that. And then those thought leadership events would then go into smaller events that, took people down different paths based on what technology or what product was more tailored to what they were trying to do. Now, when we started doing the events, we were seeing our registration numbers probably around 300. And as we started engaging audiences and getting them more to engagement, and we don't invite everyone, right? I don't believe in spray and pray. I can't afford it. So we really invited those accounts that were already engaged, that were already showing 2 to 3 actions within a certain amount of time. By doing that meant we got a very ripe audience to get to the next stage, because now we're trying to get to who is the contact within that account that seems to be the one that's going to champion for us, because they're the ones that are going to register. Then how do we get to them? How do we continue to engage that? And then how do we get the right people to a product discussion or a product demo? And as we perfected this sort of strategy, it started with that demo, that sort of small round table piece. We were bringing in maybe 8 to 10 accounts at a time. And to be quite honest, many of them weren't converting into pipeline. And that was really done by, here's who the sales team thinks we should be targeting into these smaller events. And when we sort of flipped that and said, give us a chance, let's invite the accounts that seem most interested, that are most engaged, let's invite them. When we did that, we were getting 25 to 30 accounts into these smaller events. And those 25 to 30 turned into, individual meetings. So it really was, how do we get people from one stage to the other in the virtual events? I have to say, I'm a big fan of virtual events. Listening to all of the fun things that you're all doing, I can say with 100% certainty, I wouldn't attend any of them. My times, if I'm gonna do chocolate tasting or drinking, I'm gonna do it with my friends at night on Zoom. I'm not gonna do it in when I'm trying to learn about my job. So, and I know people are doing it. So I know that I'm a case study of one, and that doesn't happen. But because I'm the person running marketing, I tend to emulate what my behavior is, right? So really sticking to, what are you trying to get out of this? What are you trying to learn? Are we giving you highly valuable content? And can we get you to a place where you're going to talk to a smaller group? And do you want to talk to a smaller group? And then eventually to a salesperson. So it was extremely strategic from the beginning, because it's part of the overall engagement strategy. It's not just events. It's very much tied to the overall engagement strategy and what accounts are ready for those events. Not all accounts are ready for an event. And my philosophy also is that it's a lot to ask somebody to spend 45 minutes to an hour with you. And I used to tell my team, it's like the creepy person walking up to somebody at a bar and saying, hey, you want to go home, without actually getting to know them. And so there really is a whole engagement strategy that goes before you ask somebody to spend 45 minutes to an hour with you. And then of course the key is valuable content, because if somebody's going to give you that time and you're just going to pitch your product to them, it's insulting. So really getting to that point where you're trying to get them engaged into a good conversation. So big fan, like I said, because of my research, I do believe in in-person events. I managed them for years. I just couldn't afford them. So I really had to get to a really, really good place of using my resources strategically.
Thank you, Dawn. Really great stuff in that last question from everyone. So appreciate that. I wanted to provide some perspective from our company and what we've learned about virtual events and in-person events. So for 18 years, all we did was in-person events, never did a virtual event. And then of course we were forced to when COVID hit. And when it comes to ABM, the one thing that we always struggled with our in-person events is the limitation of geography, especially for the smaller type of events that we do. Obviously, if you're doing a big trade show, a conference in Vegas, and people are flying in from all over, that's a different story. But for smaller events, it was challenging because our clients have target accounts that they want to show up, but how many of those can you get in a city like Phoenix? So what happens is maybe you get some of them, but you also get some other folks too who maybe aren't targets. So the quality of the attendees for these smaller events were limited by the geography. Now let's take a look at virtual. You take away that geography limitation completely, or you might want to regionalize things, or instead of just doing an event in Dallas, you might just want to focus on the state of Texas. So you have an incredible ability now to increase the quality of your attendance by only focusing on your ABM targets with virtual in a much improved way compared to face-to-face. So I think that's probably the #1 advantage that we've seen, because we're able to successfully get our clients' target accounts to participate in virtual events because they don't have that geography limitation. Now we can also talk about some of the things that were also brought up, which are the limitations of virtual, which there's plenty of. But when it comes to just ABM, targeting accounts, targeting contacts, virtual has a pretty major advantage. And then that's not going to go away when we return to in-person events, because think about the different strategies that we can now employ. We can focus on certain industries when it comes to content and not have to worry about doing things cross-industry because we're doing a face-to-face event. We want to, make sure that we have enough pool of attendees to attract. So we can get really specific when it comes to content, when it comes to industries. So all those things are really substantial to think about. So let's move on to our next question, which is taking a little bit of a different direction. What have you learned about creating and using digital content, such as edited video from virtual events to support ABM strategies? Dawn, we can stick with you on this.
I'll tell you, we started creating, especially at a panel type of discussions like this, podcasts. And just putting it in a different format got a lot more people to listen, right? Because what you're trying to do is get into how do people consume content. And that's why we do all different types of content, not one type of content, because everybody behaves differently. So using just turning that into a podcast and making it available in a podcast, we found we got our listeners up, right, within those accounts, because somebody would attend and say, to their coworker, hey, you should really listen to that. And then we found more people within the account were starting to really consume that content. So that really helped. As far as video content, there were cases when, we sort of took very quick snippets to tease the longer content and get people to engage with that or wanting to listen to that. But I have to say that podcasts were probably the big aha moment for us.
I would just add that the major benefit for us of virtual events is that everything is captured. So the intel that we have coming out of, there are no secret conversations happening at the bar. Everything is happening within this space that you can measure and capture. And so it costs a lot of money to bring a film crew out to a live event and make sure that you get that high res recording, but recording virtual events like this and then being able to repurpose that content and those conversations that you have, cut them down, come up with 20-minute video snips that's just that one perfect quote, throw that into an ad campaign that you then serve at that really targeted audience. The reusability of content at virtual events is incredible.
I just wanted to say thank you so much, especially to our panel, Dawn, Melissa, Auseh, Caitlin. Really appreciate your active participation. Wanted to thank all of our attendees. Thank you for showing up for each other, for contributing your questions as well as your own feedback, and providing an environment like we set out to do, which was to learn from each other. So hopefully we accomplished that. And another thing that I think we accomplished is we met some good new people that we can have in our network moving on. So those two goals accomplished. I know I'm feeling good about today and really hope and wish you the best success with ABM and your programs. We hope to have you join us. As you may know, this is an ongoing series. Our next one's going to focus on the topic of hybrid events and getting back to in-person. And oh boy, will that be a fun, interesting discussion. So look forward to that and have a nice afternoon.